later on. And Mulu is going to call.
I see Mike Leach on the phone.
I'm here. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Mike.
Good afternoon.
So should we get started, Leslie?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, hi, everybody. This is Chris, and I have with me Brian Schmatzer, who is our Director of Evaluation and Statistician, and Mike Leach, who is helping with project management on this evaluation. We are from New Growth Group. If there's anyone there who hasn't met us previously, we're the third-party evaluators for this grant. It is a requirement of the grant to have a third-party evaluation. Here is, oh, hang on a second. I'm recording this. There we are. There's the agenda. So I thought what I would do this afternoon, is provide an overview of the evaluation, generally speaking. I'm going to ask Mike to handle the part of the agenda pertaining to the implementation evaluation. And then as we get into the impact evaluation, it may end up being a little more discussion-oriented. Are there folks there from the Workforce Investment Agency?
No, they left. They had to go. But Earlene did have a chance to look at the intake form, and they were satisfied with that. She did state that they had some additional data that they collected there, but this was very similar to what they did for other programs.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I think there are parts of the impact evaluation plan that make some assumptions about the kind of data that we could get from the workforce agency. So when we get to that part, I would treat it as a draft, or maybe a starting point for a discussion until we can kind of run to ground the actual data that's accessible from that agency. Anyway, so we have online with us today Mike Leach, who is going to talk through the implementation evaluation. So go ahead, Mike.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I think I've met most of you, if not all of you, on a couple of the calls that we've had with Brian. And so just briefly, there's two parts to the evaluation. I think you guys know this. There's the implementation evaluation, and then there's the impact evaluation. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the implementation evaluation, and then Chris is going to talk about the impact evaluation, and then we'll have some discussion and we'll talk about some next steps. So this slide here just gives you sort of an outline of the steps that we've been going through to get the evaluation organized. And so we've put together what's called logic models. I'm sure you guys know what those are, but essentially and we'll show your logic models here in just a second, but they link the grant activities to the outcomes in a logical way, so we can sort of see the flow of what you're going to be doing and how that's going to drive certain types of impacts that we're going to be looking at and measuring. And then from there, we developed evaluation questions. What are the key questions that we want to answer in this evaluation, other than providing DOL with their outcomes, mandatory outcomes, numbers that they're wanting? There's other questions that we need answered. And so both the logic models and the evaluation questions were put together in what was called a detailed evaluation plan, which we had to submit to DOL, and you all have already submitted that. And so if anybody wants to sort of see the details around these logic models and evaluation questions, we can share that detailed evaluation plan with you if you haven't seen it already. So in terms of next steps for us, Good, good, good. We developed what's called a data plan, and I think we've shared that with you all, which is basically how we're going to collect the data for the impact evaluation. And Chris is going to go through that in much more detail here in just a minute. And we're going to be developing the inquiry plan or plans, and that's more the implementation evaluation and how we're going to approach that. And we'll be doing that in consultation with you all, of course, and we foresee those plans being developed over the coming weeks. And hopefully by the end of summer, we'll have some plans in place for the implementation evaluation, how we're going to approach it. We've been building data templates. I think Brian has shared data templates with you guys. These are basically the spreadsheets that you all can use to report data to us, and they pertain to the impact evaluation, and Chris will be talking more about those data templates. No surprise to you guys, but hopefully it's not a surprise, but we anticipate collecting data in fall 2015, this fall. So as you all know, with most TAC grants, the first year is sort of planning and getting organized, and then year 2 is when you typically enroll participants and get things going. And so I think that is the plan for you guys. And then, of course, we'll transition into ongoing evaluation activities after the fall. So the implementation evaluation, this is really the qualitative piece of the evaluation. And so, again, we haven't articulated all of this yet. We haven't developed the plan. We will be doing that. But we know we'll be using various techniques, site visits, interviews, questionnaires to gather information. We're going to be trying to investigate the mechanisms driving the outcomes. What's working pretty well, what's not working well. We'll be looking at the factors that are enabling or hindering the work and the outcomes that we're achieving. So why are certain things working well and why are certain things not working well? One of the things that we'll be doing, spending a lot of time doing, is just documenting what it is that's been done. And you guys have a clear scope of work. You guys have articulated very well what you're going to be doing. But through the implementation evaluation, we're going to document what it is that you did. And so that's going to be a key piece of what we'll be looking at. Of course, the implementation evaluation is also about continuous improvement. If we're identifying challenges and problems, things that are hindering progress, we can bring those to your attention. And then hopefully as a consortium and a group, we can figure out ways to deal with those issues and improve the progress we're making and the outcomes we're achieving. So continuous improvement is a piece for doing this. And then, this last point on the slide, setting the stage for future student success agenda. I think the TAC grants, the spirit of them overall is to try out new things to improve outcomes for students. You guys are clearly doing that with some pretty innovative activities. And hopefully we'll be able to help you guys identify things that are having an impact on students, whether it's competency-based instruction or whatever else it might be. Those are things that you might want to build on as an institution or consortium, to scale up or build further, so you can continue to impact outcomes for students. So those are sort of the pieces of the implementation evaluation. In terms of logic models, you guys have maybe seen these already, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time working through these, but you can see your strategies at the top there. Your inputs are that there's a need for wireless technician training in your region, obviously. Your model, which is the second column, is all the things that you said you would do in terms of an 8-week compressed program. Looking at prior learning credits. Did you have a question?
Yeah, and that model, we have 8 weeks compressed program, but after talking to people who did it in another place. They suggested that we add one more week. What do you think about that? Instead of 9 weeks, as they say.
No impact on us.
I beg your
Yeah.
pardon?
Go ahead, Chris.
Brian just wandered away for a second. I think that was Dr. Eob said they are thinking that they might do 9 weeks instead of 8 weeks. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make a difference to us. We'll capture the rationale, at some point. We'll talk to you and document it, and then it won't impact our data plan.
Okay.
And that, let me just make a comment, offer a comment if I can. This is Mike again. I don't think that's going to be an issue with the Department of Labor, but you may just want to check in with your program officer about that. I can't imagine that that's going to be of any concern to them. I mean, they want the program to be successful and the students to be trained right. But I guess technically it is a change to your scope of work, perhaps. So you might mention it to them. I don't know, Chris. Do you think that's good advice or not?
There's no cost impact grant.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Mike. I don't think they're going to have a problem. They tend to have problems when things become less, or the budget goes up. They're persnickety about weird things, though. I don't know what to say. It won't impact us on the evaluation. I think you should use your own judgment on whether you want to deal with your FPO or not.
Yeah, that's probably good advice. But again, as Chris said, from our perspective, 8 weeks or 9 weeks, we'll do the evaluation either way. So let's see. Moving along, you can see your short-term outcomes and then your intermediate outcomes. Yeah, back on that slide, Chris. Thank you. And intermediate outcomes, those are the ones that you've promised to DOL in your scope of work. And then there's longer-term outcomes. Next slide. So there's strategy 4. Same. That's the logic model for strategy 4, increasing employer engagement. And then strategy 6, student supports, the e-portfolio. So we'll be looking at all of those strategies with the implementation evaluation and sort of using this logic model to guide how we look at those strategies. And so again, a more detailed listing of the questions that we'll be looking at with the implementation evaluation are in the detailed evaluation plan that was submitted to DOL. But here's just a highlight of some of the key implementation evaluation questions that we'll be looking at. So, what is being implemented, and how is it theorized to be driving impacts? Has implementation occurred on time and as intended? Is there fidelity to the model? In other words, are you doing what you said you were going to do? Recognizing that in many cases with grants, as you all know, there's changes that get made. We've already discussed one, 8 weeks to 9 weeks. But we're going to be trying to determine to what extent you've done what you said you were going to do, and of course you guys want to know that as well. Have the grant outcomes been achieved? That's largely the impact evaluation. But we'll be looking at what factors are impacting the outcomes we're achieving and trying to look at those factors through the implementation evaluation and make some connection between the things that you're doing specifically and the outcomes that we're actually seeing on the quantitative side. And then with this piece of the evaluation, we're also going to have an opportunity to delve into each strategy, whether it's competency-based education, whether it's the e-portfolio piece, and ask specific questions with those strategies. How well are they working? Are they working perhaps better than things that were being done previously? Any types of questions that you guys want answered related to those strategies, we'll have an opportunity to look at. And so I guess in terms of a timeline, we'll be starting hopefully the implementation evaluation in the fall through interviews or site visits. Again, that hasn't been determined yet, those details, but hopefully we'll begin that part in the fall, and we'll be looking primarily at the planning stage that you all have just gone through. You know, what have you planned to implement, essentially? And then in the spring, we'll be looking more at how are things going with implementation. And then, of course, moving forward, we'll continue to look at how things are going with implementation. But let me make one last point before I turn it over to Chris. We see the implementation evaluation as being, even though we're going to come up with a plan for how to do it on the front end, there's going to be changes that get made to it, obviously, and it's going to be more of a fluid process and a fluid plan. And, you know, we'll be making changes as we go along, depending on what you guys are interested in learning more about and exploring. So it'll be a fluid process and hopefully valuable to you all. So with that, Chris, I will turn it over for the discussion of the impact evaluation.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And everyone, I have Brian here sitting next to me, so if I say anything incorrectly, he will correct me. Right, so the impact evaluation, this is where we look to collect data on participants and then establish some kind of a comparison analysis. It's the discussion of the comparison analysis. Well, it's discussion of the whole data plan, but I think especially the comparison analysis where we are going to probably need some further discussion with the folks at the workforce agency around the accessibility of some data elements. These are the evaluation questions. They were posed in the detailed evaluation plan, so no surprises. You can see on the left the topics that we're taking on: completions, retention, credits attained, credentials earned, and then employment. We've talked about the definition of participants. Anyone who starts the wireless technician program at Virginia State, and then comparisons as adults that are coming from the workforce investment agencies who don't enter the program but are comparable otherwise. And it's this notion of comparable otherwise that needs a little bit of running to ground. The general intent is to identify a cohort of individuals who enter some kind of a comparison group in roughly the same time frame as the people that are going through the wireless technician program. And so we
have a question.
Yeah.
On the comparison between WIP 9 and WIP 15, I think my understanding is WIP 15 is not going to be participating.
Okay.
Different issues. So how's that going to impact on the impact evaluation?
I mean, I don't know how it would impact us. The question is, WIP 15 doesn't participate. Is that going to impact the evaluation? I mean, to the extent that it lowers the N, then maybe.
Right.
Otherwise, I don't think it would.
9 is going to coordinate the
area.
Going to coordinate the whole region.
Yeah. Okay. So Brian put the flow chart together. Maybe I'll just turn it over to you to talk through the flow chart.
Sure. So I know we had written a flow chart on the whiteboard when we first showed up in Virginia, and as I was putting these slides together, I was trying to recreate that flow chart, and as I did so, I thought it might be a good idea to actually put it in here. this represents my best understanding / recollection of how people are going to flow through the process. That is, there's sort of two groups of people that we're pulling possible participants from, a set of veterans and a set of underemployed people that go through the WIB. W4W is obviously the partner that's working with the veterans. If they're not interested in the program, then they just go away. If they're interested in the program, then they're going to go through the WIB. If I remember from one of our phone calls recently, they still go through the WIB for a screen. And so it's at the WIB that part of the responsibilities from the WIB is to identify interest and see if they're going to continue on into the program. If those that don't are the sort of people that don't show interest, don't move on, are the set of people from which we would like to get comparable people for a comparison group if possible. Those that are going through to the program pass through Richard Bland for assessment. If they're not ready to begin, then there's a loop for them to go through remediation at Richard Bland. But if they're ready, then they can move into the technician program itself. There can be some asymmetry in the timing, which might result in a little wait list because of the nature of the rolling. You know, if you guys get to the point where you're rolling programs every 8 or I guess every 9 weeks, or even more frequently than that, then there might be small bits of wait list while people are waiting for the next program to start. So I threw that in there. I also threw in the possibility that if the wait list gets long and there's no chance you're going to come off the wait list, then you could actually be a comparison person as well. But anyway, this is supposed to reflect how people get through into the program. And of course, time continues off to the right of this diagram as they go through the program, through completion, through potential employment, et cetera, all that continues on off to the right. But this was focusing in on how people would find their way into the program or the comparison group.
And it's the possible comparison persons coming out of the WIB, where we feel like we need to have the additional conversation. What would be ideal would be to identify people who, based on some set of observable characteristics, are similar to our program participants and that also receive some kind of training service through the WIB. That would be best. It might not be practical, I'm not sure. The reason why it would be great to have information on people going through training is there's a whole set of outcomes associated with program enrollments, retention, completions, and they're, in terms of the dose and the nature of maybe not the dose, but at least the nature of the treatment itself. The receipt of training is obviously, what it is, and so comparing to people who also receive training would be a reasonable comparison. If it's not possible, if some workforce investment agencies don't send people to training for local budget and policy reasons, and if that's the case, then I think we can still look to draw the comparison group from the workforce agency. There'd be a little asymmetry though between the treatment and the comparison group, in that the existence of training relative to no training would be the kind of a differentiating factor.
Is it a problem if they can't, because we're not, for the possible comparison people, we're not necessarily going to have intake forms on them, are we? We're not going to program intake forms on them.
So I think this is another topic for conversation with the workforce agency. I think it would be ideal if we could get intake forms on potential comparison group members. If they, if the response is that's too much work or too complicated, or it can't be done, then we would look to see what we would.
Just summary statistics. If they can just give you their summary statistics as opposed to trying to get individual detail.
That would be our third option. Our second option would be some sort of administrative data that we could use at the individual level that we could use. And if they said no, it can't be done, then yeah, we would probably look to create some kind of a recipe for them, a template or something, and ask them to fill in data that we would use.
This is Mike. I'm just curious. Is the workforce agency getting any funding out of the grant at all?
A small amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're being compensated to do some work, obviously, on some level.
Yeah. If it's, we get it that there are practical considerations, and so we'll try to push the envelope in terms of, establishing the most rigorous evaluation we can. And if there's pushback and it can't be done and the logistics aren't working out, then we'll take what we can get. You can see here where we've kind of pitched our best case scenario, which includes intake forms for comparison groups. This is a screenshot of the intake form. The data templates that we use, you've seen the, if you haven't seen the data templates, we have three. There's the intake form, and then, we don't have three in this one.
Right, there wouldn't be a need for it one time because
the intake form gets it.
Again, as you said, in the ideal situation where we have intake forms on the comparison people, then the data we need exists for both groups from the intake form.
Right. Yeah. So my mistake. We right. So the two data templates. One is the intake form, which collects a lot of fields related to the individuals, and then an ongoing data template, which gives us an update on what happened to the individual after intake. For example, did they complete the program? How many credits did they earn? We would look for data submissions twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring. And the data submissions would pertain to the time period, the preceding time periods since the last data submission. Just in terms of one additional logistical detail, the annual performance report is due in mid-November to the Department of Labor, and this is the only report that includes numbers to the Department of Labor. And what we're looking to do, what we're doing in our data plan is incorporating all the elements of the annual performance report. And so as we collect participant data, we're also collecting the data that goes into the APR, and we'll be able to provide that back.
What will we do this November?
Say it again?
For this November's report,
Just summarize
it would just summarize our activities and because we won't have spring cohorts to report on.
If you have some yeah, for the most part, if you have some enrollments to report, you could report those. DOL tends to not be too stringent on seeing numbers in the first APR, and so I wouldn't be overly concerned if there are a lot of zeros on the APR. For the first one. For the second one, if there are a lot of zeros, then that'll raise a flag. Yeah, so I think, I mean, is this making sense? What we're trying to reflect is that a really key next step for us is developing this comparison strategy, and we'd like to try to be as rigorous as we can, but we fully understand that there are practical limitations, and so it's just a matter of us dialing in on what we can do. And then we've indicated some next steps. We know that data sharing agreements and IRB approval are administrative next steps for us. We want to settle on what the full data plan is before we start to engage in the work of those two things, but those will be coming down the pipe relatively soon.
Dr. Ridley, did we need IRB approval? Did we talk about that?
If you're going to use personally identifiable information on students, it's always appropriate to do that.
Right.
And I think you mentioned some sensitive information in social.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
it's going to be exchanged with a third party. So
Yes, sir.
that would be a wise and appropriate thing to do. I apologize. I couldn't find the dial-in number, and so I had taken some notes on a sheet on the template, but it can wait. And they're not that critical. Do you still plan to have the group in August?
September.
Okay. We just want to be prepared. We want to try to have things set up, and here we need to discuss the form in which you're going to have the, I think what is it called, participant data from the other folks, from the intake form and the others, and what kind of, is it Excel spreadsheet? Is it going to be Access? Is it going to be, whatever form it's going to be, so we'd be able to merge it with banner data when that becomes necessary.
Yeah.
Forms from them, we'd be doing the input. Yeah. Too.
I think Brian and Nikki are pretty flexible in terms of the form and format. I won't speak for them, though.
Yeah.
Anything that can be read into Brian's statistical software, I think, is fine.
We could, we could either do Excel, probably, or Access, or a flat file with a layout.
Excel.
Excel? Okay. All right.
Okay, that works.
And then we get instructions on, I guess it's just emailing it to you if it's in an Excel file. Or, well, I don't know about that, though, because if we're going to meet, I can't email socials to you. So we'll have it encrypted or some other way to get it to you.
Can't you do it where it's just the last four? Or no?
No, they won't.
The reason for the full social is so we can do a match with the state's wage records. They need which is what we'll use to track earnings, and they need the social to be able to do that. We have, I mean, we're definitely accustomed to and set up for working with sensitive data. We're used to data sharing agreements that are, the legal agreements that assign responsibilities and accountability. And also, we have in the past used a system called ShareFile, which is an encrypted data transmission system.
I don't know whether we have to check. I'll have to check to see, what we would have to do to use that, or whether or not we'd have to use what our technology services unit requires.
Yeah. Okay.
There are some particular folks that we have to follow their rules.
I have a question. It may not be for you, but maybe for the group. But when we had the Richmond Times put out a big article on this about 6-7 months ago, I got several phone calls inquiring about the course. and probably 95% of them didn't fall under, they weren't veterans and they weren't WIBs. How are we going to capture them, and are they eligible for this course? I don't know. What's your thoughts, Efren? I mean, just somebody off the street that wants to take this course, pay 10 grand. Are they eligible?
Yeah.
Okay. That's just a population I don't know we've thought about.
The question is, how do they get, you pay for the remediation for them?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
they have to pay. If they
Yeah.
pay for, they pay everything. Because it should be open to everybody.
Would they qualify for some form of financial aid?
They can, you know,
They can
apply,
apply, sure.
Yeah, like any
Nothing to
student.
keep them
you
from
know,
applying.
just, you know,
Yeah,
program stuff like that.
yeah.
This is Mike. Did you all state in your scope of work that it was only for veterans and folks coming through the WIBs?
No.
No. I just don't think we thought out loud about
You know, it says
the other
also
people.
the larger community,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
percentage-wise, I think it's 85.
85, 20,
and that's, you know,
yeah.
something like that.
85.
And then from talking to the individuals this morning, they said there may not be that many people who are qualified to do all this college level work and all the requirements. So there may not be that many because their level of preparation.
We only need 2 per class, though. So,
Still, they
yeah.
say that's
hard.
very hard. They say.
To find a displaced worker who was
Oh,
working
yeah, out of work.
typically in a factory or a production type environment.
Cannot do college level.
Yeah, and has been there typically a very long time, so they physically may not be able to do the physical part, and then
Academically.
yeah, academically, the achievement level
4.9, she said.
yes,
Grade level 4.9,
Yeah.
equivalent.
and that's a bridge too far for remediation in a reasonable amount
In
of
fact,
time.
Dr. Williamson was saying that a lot of our students, after they take freshman, sophomore, they drop out of college. So basically, they already took this college. So why not learn the climbing and get a job, a career out of it? See?
Yeah, that was one thing I would, well, that's not for this discussion, though. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Now, are you guys tasked to, like, I don't think we're going to have a problem getting a bunch of warriors for wireless folks. So I think we're going to have a lot in the pipeline because we're only doing 15 per cohort. What kind of system are we going to use that we pick the people to, obviously the first cohort, but then who's next if there's 30 people and we're only taking 15? Is it going to be like by date of enrollment? Or what's going to be the trigger to say, okay, you're the next 15 and not somebody else?
Well, you have to have a waiting list.
Yeah, a waiting list, but what if you got 30 people, how do we pick
Well, you have to, you know.
Among those
The
who
next-
qualify, you
Yeah,
can use
who
first come, first serve.
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
you know, among those, yeah.
There's one
Get based upon the date that they qualify.
That they enroll,
Well, you know, they go through a screening,
right?
and then at the end of that screening, you say that, yeah, you're eligible. Record that date,
That's the date.
and then you take them by that.
Yeah.
If there are a lot of people with the same date, do them alphabetically.
Yeah, okay.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Chris.
And I was going to say, Mark, I think you all have talked about, I mean, there are the 2 other filters. One is that veterans should take priority, and the other is that TAA workers should take second priority.
Okay. Yeah, because some of these guys, if we have a waiting list about, 30, 40 people, I mean, they may not come to the course for, 24 weeks. So they're going to be wanting, like, hey, when am I coming? What do I need to do? What am I going to do with my family right now? Are they going to go stay with my mom? They're going to have a lot of questions on, okay, when's my class date?
Yeah, we may want to look at that group as a comparison group.
But not if they're going to get through.
If they get through, then they would come off the comparison group. But if there are people that, land on the wait list and then they disappear,
Yes.
I don't know what the practicality of tracking them is. frankly. I mean, we could look for them in the wage records, but yeah. Anyway, so I think a really key next step for us is to get to the workforce agency so we can figure out what the route is going to be there. Is that something that someone can help us do?
Set up a call with them.
Ooh, with the whips. Yeah. You know, I was thinking after you started talking, we should have had you listening in all morning.
I was wondering about that. We didn't have 3 hours to listen in. I didn't anyway.
Volunteer, Mike and Brian.
This at the beginning.
Yeah, could have.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, either did we, but we did.
It might have been good to have had this at the very beginning.
So Chris, we're gonna be giving them the program worksheet, right, pretty soon, where they're that's that we can use that then to have the conversation about identifying the comparison group, right, with the WIBs. Okay.
Mike, they only have the one program, so they don't really need to do that. But we do need to have the comparison conversation.
We couldn't hear you.
I said, Mike, they only have the one program, so I didn't even really reference the program worksheet that we have for larger consortia. So
okay,
the comparison discussion still needs to happen, of course, as we're talking about now. But the list of programs is one long, and therefore pretty straightforward.
Got it.
Okay, I think I don't know. Do you have any questions for us? We if you can help us connect with the workforce agency, I think that Brian has sent over the data templates already, so you have a sense of what we're going for. The mechanics of how the data will come to us in terms of formats and security and legal channels and things. I'm less worried about. We can continue to push that forward, but the comparison group for me is my most immediate priority.
Well, we've got a call in 2 weeks, right? Same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I mean,
have a question. When we talk about the comparison group, is it between WIP and WIP?
WIP.
People that come to the WIB that don't go through the program, and people that do go through the program.
Oh, okay. So
that's what I was saying. It may be a problem.
But the problem
giving
is
you social data on
the size of the
other
sample.
clients.
Size of the sample. Because from my understanding is they are not going to produce a lot of WIPs the way it's set up. Because the requirement to join this program is a little level,
Yes.
according to them. So our best bet is the beta.
Is the what? The wait list.
Yeah, our better comparison would be people that are screened as eligible, make the waiting list, but decide not to enroll. Would probably be a better comparison group.
Yeah, that'd be a great comparison group, but I wonder how many of those people there will be. I mean, I think the wait list will be large at the beginning, but I suspect that as people, more and more people will gradually get into the program. And the ones that go to the wait list and don't go into the program will wander off and be hard to access again.
I mean, certainly for training.
Certainly for any college completions they might have gotten off the rest of their life after they walked away.
I think we should make a run at both.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we should make a run at the wait list as a comparison group. I think we should. I do think we should take a shot at the workforce agency. The worst they can say is no.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you can. I really don't even understand how that part of it works with them. But I always ask devil's advocate questions. Just
yeah. I think you're asking all the right questions, and we don't know the answer. If we can if there is the potential for a comparison group there, though, I'd like to explore it.
I just
Well, I
don't
was
know
going to.
give you
Go ahead.
individually identifiable data, or whether they will give you summary data of, we serviced X clients this year, the average, school attainment rate was this, or the average reading level was that, and the average, X percent of them were employed at the end with, this as a salary level, whether they'll just give you summary data as opposed to wanting to give you individual participant information. And they probably, that's the part that I'm...
Will that kind of information be available from the Veterans for a comparison group?
Which department?
Can only get it from them if they actually do an intake form.
But if the vets, well...
Veterans.
that information on their clients.
Because I know they're going to share it.
They're not going to give it to
well,
you.
they might. Okay. All right.
Oh boy, that's a can of worms.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it is.
Well, Chris, I was going to suggest that we use our call in 2 weeks to maybe get the workforce agency people on the call with us and begin talking this through.
Yeah. I mean, if they can join us for a little bit and we can ask them questions, I would value that conversation.
Yeah, I think we'll just have them in from here on in. They're going to be pretty integral to the process.
2 weeks, yeah.
Maybe you can invite.
Yeah. We'll either be here or on the line.
Okay.
Online,
Do you have any other questions for us?
You have any questions?
Nope.
We're good.
Okay. Let us know if you're feeling like anything we're saying seems inconsistent with what we've been saying. We're trying to draw a straight line.
Maybe you can send Brian their email or something so you can do
Yes.
invitation.
Yeah.
And then we can call them then.
Yeah, I'll send them all the emails.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you in
Talk
2
to you
weeks.
later.
All right.
Bye.
So next month, the next 2 weeks.
You got all their emails, right?
What day is that? We have